Friends, what is happening around us may be appearing to be so far away from us that we should not be unduly bothered, we should not be concerned. This is kind of common feeling. But as enlightened mind, responsible citizen, and concern for our safety of our society, safety of our nation, we must be fully aware what is happening around us. And when we look at the map, there are hot points developing around us. China has been giving a lot of concern to us. Mentioned what is happening courtesy China. Now, courtesy Russia, something is happening. An entire world is engrossed. Strategic thinkers, defense analysts, and mandarins in power corridors have started discussing in real earnest to understand why Ukraine is somehow becoming so important for every country that expert must discuss this subject and discuss in plain, simple language, which is easy to understand by common people. From International Council for Industrial Security and Safety Management, ICISS, we also pay a lot of interest on homeland security and also global security per se. Energy security is one of the dimensions. And with that context, we remain focused to the developments in Ukraine and how Russia is attempting to change the power equilibrium. This, in long range, is going to affect energy security in Europe, and it is going to be cascading effect. In ICISS, we bring in-depth examination and strategic analysis on current complex situation of Ukraine. We are going to discuss regional Russian hegemony and Ukrainian plight. And we wonder, is ambitious Putin planning for greater Russia? Today we have expert with us, Col D K Salwan, who has been actively following the events involving the Ukrainian border disputes, the Russian encouragement to disruptors and separatists, and has studied the regional geopolitics. And as expert today, he is going to discuss the subject of everyone's interest so far as Ukraine is concerned. Discussion is organized by International Council for Industrial Security Safety Management, which is in forefront in professionalizing the professionals. And without much ado, I welcome and feel very happy to make introduction of such an expert like you. You have been very thorough in your strategic analysis and examination of complex situation and sharing with audience in simple language. So if I was news editor, I would have captioned the headline, सोची समझी साजिश के तहत रशिया ने सोची में कुछ काम किया. It all began, I feel it all began in Sochi, but I may be wrong. So I would like to know how you bring the historical perspective to what is happening around Ukraine and what is being done by Russia. Sir.
Good evening to you and good evening to all my viewers. Gentlemen, we will be discussing the Ukrainian crisis in as simple terms as possible for everybody to comprehend the nuances of the ongoing crisis. Actually, the Ukrainian crisis has its start almost 2.5 decades ago, and it has snowballed into what the Russia perceives as US and the West shifting their strategic and political frontiers to its eastern doorstep, that means on its border with Ukraine. And second aspect is how we perceive the evolving world order. As far as Ukraine was concerned, the Russians amassed their forces amounting to 1.5 lakh approximately, including those on the Belarus front with the Ukraine, and carried out maneuvers. Consequent to these maneuvers, there was a flurry of diplomatic activities to diffuse the situation, in which the Germany and the France played a major role. Even German Chancellor visited the the Russia, only few days ago. However, while this diplomatic diffusion of the situation was going on, there were threats and counter threats from both sides. Once on one side were Committee of Democracies led by US and the West, and on the other side was Russia. As the things started during Putin's visit to Beijing 2022 inauguration, Beijing 2022 refers to the Winter Olympics, which is being held there. After the inauguration ceremony, Russia and China issued a joint statement in which they said that we are the world powers. That cemented the what we call today as Sino-Russian axis. So in a sense, it was the Committee of Democracies led by America and West on one side, and Russia and China on the other side. Russia and China, gentlemen, are the authoritarian powers. Though Russia is a federal democracy, but over a period of time, it has become almost authoritarian. Now, when this thing happened, the issue of diplomatic diffusion having failed and ebbed by the Chinese support in the backdrop, on the midnight of 22nd February 2022, Putin staged a geopolitical coup. That is, he recognized Donetsk and Luhansk provinces of Donbass, which is approximately 16,799 square kilometers of area bordering Russia, as independent republics. This set the clock on. After all, this recognition, once it has come, it has shaken up the other parts of the universe, for the simple reason that is the authoritarian axis has got the ability to do so. It all happened primarily because Putin, in a very shrewd manner, used his erudition to realize or evaluate that the soft power and the hard power of the West, which is much higher than what the Russia and China put together have, will not be synergistically applied against the Russia in the Ukraine. Rightly so, because while the US showed its interest in the Ukraine, however, some of its allies, they were not in favor of an all-out confrontation with Russia for economic and trade reasons. And we all understand that how Germany was interested that Nord Stream 2, which has been which has been completed but not operationalized, is how important to the European nations. It is basically the energy issue which is causing the concern in some of its allies. However, after the recognition of these two republics, the allies have now joined hands and there is a cohesion in the US and the West as far as their stance to oppose Russian designs are concerned. So far, so for the crisis as it exists today. Now let's go back in time and see what led to this kind of a crisis. Ukraine, gentlemen, as you all know, became independent on 24th of August 1991, post disintegration of the erstwhile USSR. It has got approximately an area of 6,16,000 square kilometers and has got the ethnicities, two primary ethnicities. One is the Ukrainian and the other one is Russian. Russian ethnicities amount to about 18% and they are mostly inhabited in the areas which border Ukraine and Russia, mainly Donbass area and then in the Crimea area, which was liberated by Russians in the year 2014. Now, as far as the Ukraine is concerned, Ukraine is very strategically located. That means it offers strategic advantage to the West to have its hegemonistic designs on. That means the US as a hegemon feels that it can influence Ukraine, it can control Ukraine, it can have influence over Ukraine, while the Russians on the other hand feel they can use the Ukraine as a buffer between the West and the Russia. Here I would like to remind the viewers that prior to breakup of the erstwhile USSR, Ukraine was part of USSR and the East European countries provided a buffer between the US and the West. That means US and its allies of the NATO countries. Ukraine, gentlemen, as you look at it, has got Russia to its west. It has got Belarusia to its north. It has got Slovakia, Hungary and Poland to its west. And it has got Romania and Moldova to its south. So that buffer which was existing prior to the 1991 got vanished, and Ukraine, being the largest country of the Europe, is very rich minerally as well as very well developed industrially. Even when the breakup of the USSR took place, the US at that time interceded as far as the distribution of the nukes between Russia and Ukraine were concerned, and also how the naval assets were to be divided. Crimean the Crimean port was allowed to be used by the US and the Ukraine president at that time for Russian maritime use. However, when this thing was going on, the areas bordering Russia, that is the Donbass area, is predominantly Russian, and there was unrest in that area. They wanted to, break away and declare independence. However, in the year 1997, Ukraine expressed its desire to join the NATO. And in the year 2013, that time Yanukovych was the president. He promised to the Ukrainians that we will join the European Union and sign a European Union Ukrainian agreement for this purpose. But somehow in the November 2013, he reneged on his promise of signing the agreement. As a result, there was a lot of resentment, and it led to a movement called the Euromaidan movement. Euromaidan movement resulted in dethroning Yanukovych, who later fled to Russia, and also there was unrest in the whole of Ukraine, where the police had to use, the plastic bullets and other means. In the meantime, the Donbas region also became very active. Donbas has always been a sort of a rebellious territory, which was supported by Russians, being on the border, and they are having the same ethnicity as the Russians. While this Euromaidan movement was on, in the year 2014, the two things happened. There was a Minsk agreement signed in Minsk involving Ukraine, Russia, France, and Germany from the European side to diffuse or to sort out the movement amicably. However, this Minsk movement, when it was on in 2014, this resolution was on, Russia invaded Crimea and liberated Crimea. And later on, till as late as 2019, there are about 86% of the Crimeans who feel that their allegiance to Russia is very much there, and they want to be with Russia as far as Crimean Republic is concerned. Now, getting back to when the first Minsk agreement failed in 2014, the second one was also signed in 2015. It also failed. In the meantime, the Donetsk and Luhansk, these two provinces, had two airports, international airports, by the same name. In the meantime, there was some sort of a struggle, or some sort of a armed struggle between the Ukrainians and the Donbassians, and the Donbass downed an IL-76 of 25 Airborne Brigade of Ukraine. And if you recollect, in 2014, there was a Malaysian aircraft which was shot down over Ukraine, which led almost to the international crisis. And later on, it was revealed that it was shot down by the Russian surface-to-air missiles. That means the Russia has been arming the rebellions in the Donbas area with heavy weapon systems, which the Ukraine always resented. However, there was some sort of a negotiations going on between Russia and Ukraine. Russia wanted that Ukraine must declare Donbas as an autonomous territory, while the Ukraine said they will hold elections in Donbas, and later on see. So Russia always thought that if Ukraine is ready to join, or is expressing its concern to join NATO, then the Donbas region will also go along the same way. So it will get the US and the NATO to its door. So that's why the Russians, till as late as at the end of January or in the first week of February, always told the West that you cannot trample the security concerns of the Russia. So when this happened, Putin knew that this the soft power of the West, that means by way of negotiations or diplomatic parleys, etc., is not finding is not making any headway. And at the same time, he also realized that the Americans have said that they will position 3,000 of their troops in Poland. So he realized that the militarily weak Ukraine is not in a position to confront Russian might. And also alongside, the Ukrainian president was all along telling the US president that please do not raise the ante to an extent which harms the economic interests of the Ukraine. Because in the world today, as we all understand, that there is so too much of economic interdependence in terms of energy resources. And Ukraine, to a great extent, is dependent on Russian energy, because the Russian energy passes overland of Ukraine into the other countries to the west. Now, when all this was happening, when the Chinese came on the scene, it is very easy to deduce here that post declaration of Sino-Russia being the two world powers, that means the axis having been established, it emboldened Putin. And what he did, he very quietly, without firing a shot, what we can describe as a surgical strike or a laser surgery done on the midnight of 22nd February 2022, declaring the Donetsk and the Luhansk as the republics. So this is where today we are. I hope I have been able to explain in very simplistic terms the chronology of the Ukrainian crisis as it has emerged, and today at this hour where we are as far as the Ukraine is concerned.
So finally, it emerges out that one country aspiring to get more stability, more power, and progress for its own citizen. Any country in that situation of Ukraine would have done same thing. And there is another neighbor very strong in the world, all the muscle power and all the ambition, and with ambitious leader who doesn't want neighbor to be stronger. So it is as old vicious game which power players play. So Putin is also doing something not very unusual in his position. But then
Actually,
you did confirm that it was Sochi Samji Sajesh. Now,
you see, I will stop you here for a minute.
please.
See, even Ukraine's desire to join NATO has not been welcomed by many allies of the NATO, because the NATO US wants, but the NATO allies feel that if we allow Ukraine to become part of the NATO alliance, then we will have to deploy our forces in Ukraine. And they do not want to confront Russia directly for various trade, economic, and other reasons. And at the same time, the European Union too is not very keen to admit Ukraine into its fold, for the simple reason they feel that it will lead to a lot of migration ex-Ukraine into the Europe. So these are two other main reasons which leaves Ukraine the way it is. However, the saber rattling is on. We will have to see which way the things take turn. ऊंट किस करवट बैठता है वो अभी हमें देखना पड़ेगा, because it is more than almost 36 hours now that that recognition of these two republics has not led to anything tangible except for the soft power threats of sanctions, which we will be discussing later.
True.
Because today
we'll wait for further developments. It is too early to analyze what has happened only yesterday. But then the equations were being created and recalculated and recreated for a very long time. Europe doesn't want Ukraine to be member of NATO. As you said, few countries do not favor that entry.
Yeah.
But most of the European countries favor gas reserves of Ukraine.
Yeah.
So power hungry countries are also energy hungry.
Yeah.
Russia doesn't want to part with Ukraine's gas, and European countries are giving glad eyes to prospects of getting gas from Ukraine. So, energy security and diplomacy thereon. Is it only about gas or something else which would attract Europe so far as Ukraine is concerned?
See, no, it is basically because if the gas which the Europe is depending upon is from Russia, because Russia is supplying approximately, I think, about 63 billion cubic feet of the gas per year to these countries, and at a rate which is just $240 for 1,000 cubic feet of natural gas, compared to the American gas, which is being supplied at $1,000 per cubic feet. In today's world, when the here I will bring into the aspect of polarity of the evolving global order. We always said that it was a bipolar world order when erstwhile USSR and America were facing each other. Disintegration of USSR led to US being the only recognized world power. So it was almost a unipolar kind of a world order. And US is a hegemon by all standards. It has never fought a war on its own soil, but it has taken the war into the other countries through expeditionary forces. Now, today itself, I was watching that when the Russian ambassador was called upon to explain the circumstances or the legality or whatever you want to call it as the righteousness of the Russian action to declare these two republics, he very categorically stated that when the Iraq was invaded through expeditionary forces or the Desert Storm was launched, then all the international rules and laws were put to the wind. So the Russians to understand, because it today is basically a battle between a hegemon and a person who is worried for his own security. Here I will quote the example of German naval chief who said that the Putin deserves respect and he is right in his security concern. And on this statement, he had to resign. So the Russia basically feels that these are his security concerns, which take precedence over everything else. And now with China in tow, both these people have got on one side. So what we are seeing today is the world will be a bipolar world as the new global order emerges. Here I would like to quote a saying by Lord Krishna after Mahabharata. When he went and met his guru asked him that, Krishna, what have you done? The Lord Krishna very innocently in his own style replied, I create a bipolar world. And this both the poles being opposite, they keep on working on each other, and that is how the world runs. So bipolarity is the law of nature, and as we see today, the emerging world order will also be a bipolar, not a multipolar or a unipolar. However, there would be an ongoing grueling tussle between the committee of democracies on one side, they make one pole, and while the authoritarian regimes of Russia and China, they make the another pole. As of now, these are the only two set of countries who are confronting each other. And a contact kinetic, that means a physical aggression in Ukraine, or a fight between Russia and Ukraine, sorry, the NATO countries, will bring the war to the Russian front in Ukraine, while a contact kinetic in case of India and China will not bring the NATO or any other country to our door. So this is a very big distinction which we need to understand, that the contact kinetic has got very different dynamics as far as these two words are concerned.
For our viewers, I have something to share, and I focus on why Ukraine is so important. Somehow, people must understand that the Ukraine crisis, which has been dominating geopolitics for over 3 months, yesterday saw some development, and people are still not very clear why Ukraine is so important in Europe and why Ukraine is so important, especially to Russia. Let's first start with the Ukraine's importance and why Ukraine matters. Ukraine is one of the biggest countries in the Europe on territorial basis, with 41 million highly educated people strongly motivated to work. Ukraine is first in Europe in recoverable reserves of uranium ores, second in Europe and 10th in the world in titanium ore reserves, second in world in manganese ore reserves, 2.3 billion tons or 12% of world's reserve, second largest iron ore reserve in the world, 30 billion tons, second in Europe in mercury ore reserves, third in Europe and 13th in the world in shale gas reserve, 22 trillion cubic meters. So it is not only natural gas, it is shale gas also.
Yes.
Fourth in world in total value of natural resources, and seventh in the world in coal reserve, 33.9 billion tons. Enough for Putin to set an eye on Ukraine.
See, sir, it's like this. Like we said in the beginning when we started
Why
the discussion, that Urane's
should
location is not only strategic, but it is a very mineral rich country as well. And if we correlate the two issues, why China went for BRI and he adopted that that economic predatory strategy, that is what we call it as the debt trap strategy, was primarily to tap the resources, the mineral resources of the universe where the China is lacking. So this strategic location of uh, Ukraine brings America on the eastern doorstep of Russia and also will help them utilize its minerals. And second, why Ukraine is again very important is because it is inhabited by people of Russian origin. The cultural ties are very strong. The cultural ties take so many thousands of years to emerge. But Ukrainian have expressed their desire to move with the Europe for the purpose of better economic reforms and a civilizational way of living, leaving aside the
my
outdated
my
Soviet
second
cultural way.
part
Hanji.
part also remain, and let me also share with you, and then I'll ask your comment on another important issue. And I was now on to second part of Ukrainians' importance.
Hanji.
Ukraine is first in Europe with reference to arable land area. Third in world by the area of black soil, 25% of world's volume. First in world in exports of sunflower and sunflower oil. Second in world in barley production and fourth in barley exports. Ninth place in world in production of chicken eggs. 16th in world in cheese exports. Ukrainian can meet food needs of 600 million people across the world. So that is another dimension of Ukraine's importance.
Yes.
Back to you, Colonel Salwan. We have seen how Ukraine is in a situation where its own strength becomes its weakness. It is so strong in so many ways, and that has become its weakness. somehow this is, paradox of the situation, that such a country which has, abundance of natural resources, which has committed, educated citizenship, and the country which is so far making all the progresses which can be envied to countries which are developing. So the positive point of Ukraine has become negative, in the sense that Russia would not let it live in peace. Is it ambitious plan of Putin? And if today it is Ukraine, what you see tomorrow, and how it is going to impact the world, politics, the world diplomacy? Ukraine is not
You
going to
see,
be the last point for Russia.
uh, like we said in the initial stages also, and as the crisis emerged, that the Russian concern is not hegemonistic. If we really come to think of it, Russia has never been a hegemon. It has never sent out any expeditionary force except for Afghanistan, where it met its Waterloo. And it is more concerned for its security, because it feels that that initial buffer post World War II, when the Eastern Europe was created, Eastern European countries, they joined the Warsaw Pact countries, and they actually formed a buffer against the West, against the NATO alliance. But post 90, when the disintegration of erstwhile USSR took place, most of these countries, they joined the NATO. And Ukraine was the only country left which did not join NATO, maybe because it borders very firmly with Russia. Because there is approximately this area of Donbass, stretches to a border area of about 427 kilometers physically demarcated, and on the northern side of Ukraine is the Belarus. So Ukraine, despite all its resources and having got its share of nuclear weapons and navy post 1990 on becoming independent, still has not been able to militarily evolve itself to that level where it can stand up to Russia, because the Russia tested Ukrainian waters very well through Donbass, and that is where the Ukrainian could not make a headway. So somewhere there is a militaristic weakness in the Ukraine's approach to the global affairs. I feel that maybe that this particular crisis is an eye-opener, and it shakes up Ukraine from its Kumkarnian slumber, and they start developing themselves as militarily also, and do not look westwards over their shoulders for any military assistance or help, because they must understand that it is their crisis and they only have to fight. That is how I look at it.
So, with your comment now, we come to fairly closer to our end of discussion, and for the benefit of our viewers, we are going to discuss same subject tomorrow also, and tomorrow we will also discuss, in second part of discussion, the role UN is playing. Today we will close the discussion with few figures to be shared, and at this point we will start tomorrow discussion, that why for Russia and for Europe, Ukraine is important, and in Europe,
So
more than
just
Europe.
sir, I'll just stop you for a minute here, sir. While we have discussed the crisis and the evolution of the crisis, it would be incomplete without discussing Indian context as far as the Ukraine is concerned. Gentlemen, India is neither an ally of Russia nor of US. It is a strategic partner. It is a strategic partner of US. The Quad is one such example. It has joined the Committee of the Democracies. And at the same time, from the previous years, it has been a strategic partner of Russia, and the erstwhile USSR stood by India during the crisis of 1965 and 1971. India has lot at stake in terms of evolving world order. Post 1947, when India became free, the world order had already been decided in 1942 at the end of the Second World War. So it didn't have much say. But now, as India is economically resilient and is also a military power to reckon with, it has to carve a niche for itself. India has played its cards very well. It has always talked about diplomatic resolution of the conflict. Even in the United Nations Security Council, it said the same, because India does realize one thing, that to counter China, India needs Quad, and also for to maintain a very balanced weapon supply or its other needs, it needs Russia's support too. So India will have to play its role very well, and as a strategic partner, it has got enough elbow room or elbow space to find its way. This is where I feel India should be actually.
I don't know, Col Salwan, you might be right, and other experts also would try to emphasize role of India and India playing card, balanced act. But I have the gut feeling that ultimately it is India who has to come clean and take side. In fact, time has gone where you could play non-aligned, and still be there. Uh,
Yeah.
it is India's interest uh, to say clearly what they want. Being ambivalent, no country will ever become superpower. If India wants to be superpower, then India will have to very clearly make a stand and state with the world community what India feels. Being here and being there would not serve in long run. But then I am totally novice in this field, and
No, sir,
that is how I
I
depend
will,
on experts.
I will, I will support your agreement argument with one point which is very relevant today. India never faced Russia as a strategic partner in being axis with China. Today, when India deals with Russia, he is dealing with a partner of Sino-Russian axis. So this is a very major dynamic development which has taken place, and we will have to watch how eruditely India plays its cards. It was not there earlier. India was never faced with a Russia-China axis, which today it is facing.
I immediately recollect what was happening in case of Afghanistan.
Yeah,
Being ambivalent and being non-aligned and trading the path, middle path.
yeah,
Ultimately, we have to show our card. If it is card game, then somehow you cannot play blind. Again, I'm not very expert in card games, but then I believe that someday you have to show your card, and you cannot have winning a streak purely on luck. Someday, your luck would not favor you, and maybe your power and your expertise and your position will favor you. But then this is the part which we will very happily discuss in tomorrow's discussion, sharing with the
yeah,
viewers that tomorrow we are going to discuss Russian recognition and Ukrainian retribution, whether Ukraine will respond to what Russia has done to Ukraine, dividing it into three parts by just one executive order, and how UNO is playing the role of totally defunct organization, which has never been successful so far as stopping countries going to violent situation, stopping countries reaching flare points. UN historically has not delivered for which it was mandated. Share it immediately. Thank you, viewers, for joining us in the discussion. Later on, also, you can use same link which we have shared in social media. And at the end, I so thankfully greet you, Colonel Salwan. You have been very, very helpful, and your knowledge, your very clear analysis of situation and sharing with viewers in plain, simple language, easy to understand, is tremendously helpful. And our endeavor is to share with our viewers the contents on subjects which they would like to understand easily. And it is complex situation, and people make it very, very complicated and difficult to understand. Language of diplomacy, language of strategic analyst is never so easy. You made it so easy. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you,
And
sir.
let's meet tomorrow with Brigadier Sandeep Kumar.
Thank you,
Thank you
sir.
very much, viewers. Join our link, subscribe to the channel, and leave your comments there. Thank you very much.